what I'm going to tell you is that in the first year, we became Jazz Station of the Year. We increased audience from 80 to 140,000. We increased revenue by 300%. And the reason I was able to do that is because I tapped into a larger system that you all have access to as well. At least the leadership does in a very intimate way, but it should trickle down, if not allow you to exhume some information, some knowledge, some best practices from. Anyway, I did that for 7 years. We did a lot of community engagement work. We put on a jazz lecture concert series every month. We did town hall meetings every quarter. Deeply engaged our volunteers in the work that they did to extend our reach into the community. So I deeply value what you bring to the table. I intimately understand the passion you bring to what you do. And I'm very, very clear of the value that you bring to WBAI. It's not lost on me. I don't want you to think I'm one of those guys who spent his whole career in public broadcasting and only sees through that lens. One of the main reasons why I left public media is because I was disenchanted with the white liberal gaze on the people of color and their inability to become welcoming and inviting to the audience potential that lied in people of color. So it's one of the main reasons I left. Okay? Right. So I'm here in Pacifica because I feel like this is one network that at least says it's down for that. And I believe can get there if it uses best practices. So you're going to hear me talk a lot tonight about best practices, about community engagement, how it informs program development, how it informs development itself, all the revenue centers. I'm going to talk to you about how I don't accept the notion that we're not a part of the public media ecosystem. Some of you want to hold on to that, but that's invalid. And I'm going to give you two reasons why it is. First and foremost, you're CPB qualified. You get CPB money, and CPB only funds public broadcasters. So let's be real clear. That distinction is real between community, media, and public. I get it. I used to be, as was mentioned, the president of NFCB. I fundamentally understand the difference between community radio and public. But the only difference is that public broadcasting is deeply researched and data-driven, whereas community media is much more anecdotal and based on people's beliefs, assumptions, and their understanding of things. That's not good enough anymore, and here's why. I agree. Here's why. The dynamics have changed. The blueprint that Pacifica was birthed on doesn't work anymore. And the reason it doesn't is because of cable, because of digital media, because of social media. The paradigm has shifted. And if we continue to pretend that the way we're doing programming now is going to generate the kind of audiences, the kind of support, the kind of public service, which is the most fundamental thing we need to be doing, public service, then you're sadly mistaken. So I'm going to break that down. I'm going to say a lot of things tonight that are going to upset members of the LSD. They're going to upset members of the management team, and may even upset you. In fact, they probably will. But I will also say that I actually relate to much of what was said by the presenters today. Much of what was said, I completely and 100% agree with. The question is, do we share the same approach to getting there? But the end game, I agree with. Okay? So, we're going to go through a bit of a PowerPoint. I'm going to try to go through this rapidly because I want to make sure I leave time for Q&A. It's why I asked the presenters earlier to only take up 10 minutes. Not because I wanted to limit their ability to talk. I wanted to make sure I gave you all enough time to fire back at me about what my PowerPoint presentation is all about.
So Maxie, let's invite the people at the door to please come in, and also there's a sheet to sign.
And there's a whole row of seats right here in front.
Please come in.
So come on in, let's make this close.
Yeah, please come in.
Before I even get started, are there any, who's the elder, and I'm late on doing this, who's the elder? May I have permission to speak?
Is anybody older than 60?
May I have permission to speak? I'm a little late on asking, but can I ask for permission to address the crew?
Don't ask the wrong one now.
If they'll shut up.
If they'll shut up?
Stop it.
You're in a room full of talkers.
That's all right. I get that. We all know we have one mouth and two ears, right? So let's listen. Let's try to respect and be quiet. And listen, before we even get started, I want to say I really appreciate the time and attention you're providing. I'm really appreciative that you came out in the rain. So again, madam, Are you going to give me permission to speak?
Yes.
I appreciate you. All right. This first slide, I want to talk about the ecosystem within which WBAI exists. So let me get out the way here. You're part of the Pacifica network. There are 5 stations, there's archives, there are affiliates. So when we talk about the network, BAI is a part of it, an important cog of it. When we talk about platform agnostic, we're talking about the fact that you guys have an opportunity to present yourself on air, online, on stage, and on the minds of those who are progressive thinkers here in New York and the metropolitan area. Your demographic, progressive, right? Cultural, social, political, philosophical, any others? Any other?
Radical?
Radical? Okay, you can include all that.
New York Central.
Communist.
Communist too, okay. So I'm going to point out a few things that I think have caused significant injury to Pacifica over the years. The first one is factionalism. We probably got them in this room, right? LSB, the national board has factions. The local stations have factions. It actually was the biggest surprise for me coming to Pacifica as the executive director. How steep, deep, and dysfunctional those factions are. And the drama that they create, the lack of productivity that we have because of it. I think they're anti-democratic. And I say that because people aren't voting their consciousness. They're not even voting for what they truly believe. They're voting to be aligned with somebody. And that's a problem, because if you can't approach the issues, whether it's at the board level, the staff level, station level, the larger national level, with an independent thinking, I think we have problems. It is why we are dysfunctional at the national level with the board. It's why we're dysfunctional at the LSB level at every station in the system. Houston is a complete train wreck right now because of factionalism. Human capital is a big one too. Too many times, Pacifica stations have been managed by people who don't have professional media backgrounds.
He said that.
Too many times, the program directors are people who have never been formally trained in programming. Programming is an art. It's not a casual circumstance that occurs because somebody had an idea. There's an actual art to it. It's a craft. You don't hire someone to do electrician work in your house if they're not qualified. Why are we doing that here at Pacifica? Why are we doing that at any one of our stations? We're in too large a market, too significant an opportunity to reach and impact the country to settle for less than top-notch talent. But for some reason, across the board, we have this issue. It's in management, it's in programming, it's definitely in development. We don't have one station in the Pacifica lineup that is healthy financially because we don't have professionals manning the shop. The finance...
Womaning or staffing.
Staffing, what did I say? Manning, sorry. Sorry, thanks for correcting me. That's all right.
Oh, is that ever funny?
Development. Where are the journalists? Any journalists in the house?
Hey, radio journalist.
We don't have enough of you professionally trained reporting. So at some point we've got to upgrade the human capital that's in management positions at our station so that we can get the station to operate at a higher level. I said earlier that the playbook is outdated. We have a public access approach to who gets on our air. It's who raised their hand first, who spoke the loudest, who got in good with the PD. It has nothing to do with what's more important, and that's public service. I'm going to break this down in detail in a minute. We are programmer driven. That's an old model. We used to broadcast one to many. That model's over. That's not what's happening now. So the producer or programmer driven approach to programming, where it's about me and my show, which is all I hear when I hear fundraisers. Support my program. Support me on this hour. That's old. It's a played out formula. We have to become user driven. That means data and research based to understand how people are using us. We have to survey the progressive community and find out how do they use media. That's how we reflect them. It is not out us to them. We can't determine that for them. They have to tell us. This is an idea I have. I don't know if it'll work. I actually think the root of our problem is the local station boards. Okay? So let me explain. I said earlier they're anti-democratic, they're dysfunctional. We're not asking the question of people who want to be on the LSB, what is your time, talent, and treasure that you bring to uplift this institution? If we're just letting people on because they got votes, or they're part of a faction, that doesn't serve. The LSB should be made up of people who bring time, talent, and treasure. That either means they can fundraise really well, they have money, they have talent, they can actually do accounting, they can do business management, maybe they got legal backgrounds. Time means that they're willing to do the work. Geographic, gender, racial, and expertise diversity is lacking in our LSBs. The programming committee for the national organization has only one member who's ever done programming. Does that make sense? It can't make sense. So we've got to reroute this whole architecture. It's flawed. I need the LSBs, which become the national board, to be people who actually bring something to the table. Oh, let me go back real quick. If you look at this slide, I broke down the makeup because we have to have a certain number of staff, certain number of local station delegates. The GC, that stands for governance. The C stands for compliance. That means people who understand law. Governance is people who understand how to structure an organization and work in its governance. CE means community engagement. These are people who know how to actually do surveying, who can map the community and help us get deeper into different communities that are progressive in New York, in Houston, and LA, DC. C is for content, D is for development, and A is activism. We need people on the boards who are activists, who know how to gather groups of people and move the masses towards a mission or goal. Another area of injury, I mentioned this one, I won't even go through this other than to say on the right side of the screen. These are organizations that are within the public broadcasting ecosystem. They all bring expertise in areas that are crucial to what we do. Harwood is all about community engagement. Anyone ever heard of the Harwood Institute? Yes. Yeah. Jacobs Media is about digital and social media. They do data studies. They have all kinds of research to tell us how best to communicate, not just with millennials, that's just one part of the picture. And I would argue it's not even the right one for us to be focused on. But they know how older adults, younger, mid-range adults are using technology. PRPD, Public Radio Program Director. There are best practices to this. Some of you don't even have clocks. Okay? That's unacceptable. You got a program with no clock? How is anyone, like a program director, supposed to insert any kind of business on your program with no clock? There are best practices to that. Public Radio News Director is PRNDI Incorporated. If we're going to do news programming, why not get best practices from those who have studied the craft, who have defined how to utilize journalism in a new digital era? Greater Public is all about revenue centers. We don't do membership drives well. None of us do. We don't do major donor support campaigns. We don't do any number bequests. I mean, you go down the list of revenue centers that we have access to, we don't do any of them well here. There's not one Pacifica station that does development, revenue generation effectively. Not one. That's ridiculous. To be this old of an organization and have no best practices in any of this stuff, that's nuts. So this is where we gotta go. I mentioned the playbook. Best practices do not conflict with mission. There's nothing about doing best practices that means we're not going to be radical, communist, progressive. All those things you want to be and think you are, can happen despite employing best practices. Okay? It's almost like we have an allergy to best practices in public in community radio. I saw this at NFCB. I see that with Pacifica. There's this aversion to doing stuff in a way that's been researched and data-driven. It's crazy to me. What the hell is that all about? Design thinking and human-centered development. Has anyone ever heard of design thinking? Design thinking was made popular by Cal Berkeley's design school. They're in Berkeley. We got a station in Berkeley. Why are we not tapping into that? I built the takeaway at WNYC with others. The research architecture, the program development, the staffing, all that was done out of a process called Ideate.
John Hockenberry too?
Well, look, I ain't got nothing to say about that. I wasn't involved with his hire, but all the staff around him I hired. I was part of that team. It was the most diverse staffing unit in public broadcasting at the time. It was young, progressive, folks who had dynamic skill sets, digital media skill sets, and they put a layer of old white men on top of it.
And the black women got screwed.
Exactly, and that's why it was a problem. But the formation of the program was the real deal. Don't get twisted by what was put on top of it. What the architecture speaks to, the research methodology, was groundbreaking. And that's why that show still exists today. Okay? When I was at NFCB, I created something called the 5x5 model. Anyone ever heard of it? Probably not. It was implemented in great detail for a couple years at NFCB. It was what we called a cultivation system, a radio station cultivation system, where we basically said there are 5 stages of development in these 5 areas of radio station operations. And we said the first thing you have to do as a station is identify where you are on that grid. And then we'll work with you to evolve your skills so that you become an optimal community radio station. So, I'm a big believer in these 5 areas being cultivated. Let's start with governance. These are the things that good governance and democracy require. What that verbiage is all about is the ability for the station to leverage the governance to good effect. So when we talked earlier about the LSB, the local station board, having a certain makeup that is utility for the staff, the station itself, brings value. That's what we're talking about. It's being able to leverage the governance to good effect. When we talk about compliance, you either are or you're not, right? You're either compliant or you're not. And we're compliant. We have to be compliant to 4 different folk. Okay? We got the state of California, because that's where Pacifica totally is governed. CPB, if we want that CPB check, if we want to be in compliance and get that big, sweet $1 million plus check. The FCC, we violate FCC all the time. I mean, I've heard people do underwriting on programs, and we don't have underwriting. But we do it, and we do it wrong. If the FCC were listening, they could fine us lots of money, and we ain't even bringing in lots of money to do it.
You can't sell Gary Knowles water filters?
Maybe not. And the last one is the Pacifica bylaws.
Sorry.
Oh, forget that.
Which is a complete train wreck because...
Hello.
Because, as the lawyers tell us, the lawyers tell us the Pacifica bylaws are problematic because there's too many ways to interpret them. So at some point, I think the national board has to ask, is it time to rethink, redo, reevaluate the way that we've written these bylaws? Community engagement, so let me take a step back and just tell you that the reason I was invited to speak to you today was because management wanted me to explain my philosophy for programming and content development. That was really the root of this conversation. It grew to something bigger because members of the LSB asked if they could come and be quiet and just listen. And I said, why not? And other folks said they wanted to comment. So we've grown into something bigger, but this was really the root of it. A lot of people think when you talk about programming and content, you're talking about the shows, right? I think you start much earlier than that. To me, community engagement is the first step in developing programming. I went to a conference in Minnesota, and I met a woman outside of the conference who said, I've been doing the arts and culture show here in Minnesota for 30 years. I said, that's wonderful. I said, So when the Ming community and the Somalian community do arts and culture activity, how do you get abreast of that? She said, they come to me. I said, do they? I said, so have you done anything lately? She said, well, no, they don't really approach me that often. So that's a problem, right? We're talking about a community that has significant Hmong and Somalian communities, and yet they are not tapped into because this woman's waiting for them to come to her. Okay? Community engagement is about going out into the community by defining the niche. Let me address this word niche. Someone told me that Pacifica is a niche. Progressives are a niche. And I said, show me a programmer who's not a niche. ESPN is a niche. Sports enthusiasts, that's a niche, whatever you want to call it. A niche. The History Channel is niche programming, however you want to look at it. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, they're all niche. Everything is niche now. Nobody's mass broadcasting anymore. That playbook is over. Everyone has carved out an audience and is attempting to super serve them as best they can. So that's the first thing. We have to ask ourselves, who is the progressive community? Who are the progressive communities, plural, in the New York metropolitan area? Of those groups, who can we primarily target? Who's secondary and who's tertiary? Now, I'm not going to break that down today. That's a more nuanced conversation. But the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, who are we targeting? I think we know who that is. We're pretty convinced that it's progressives, right? And people might go beyond that, something even more radical than people who are progressive, okay? The second thing you have to do is map the community. You have to find out who are the influencers in the community. So let's say we want to target the LGBTQI community as part of our niche. Not primary, secondary, or tertiary necessarily, but a fabric of, right? By community mapping, you're identifying who are the organizations, who are the individuals who are working with the LGBTQI community intimately so that we have a deep, rich understanding of their needs, wants, and aspirations. If you don't do that work, you can never know. You may have someone who says they represent the LGBTQI community, and they may have some connections, and they may be an activist, and they may do some things, but they probably don't really know the full picture. And they may not have enough tentacles to reach out to the whole community that we just mentioned. So this is an ongoing process. It doesn't stop with a one-time survey. This is ongoing. But you have to map, identify influencers, both individuals and organizations, and you gotta sit them down and listen to them. You've gotta ask them questions. How can we, as Pacifica, WBAI, serve you better? What do you need? What's the community need from an information standpoint? This is tough work, but we can partner, and I know that this has been talked about, with universities to do this kind of work. Urban Affairs Studies and other departments within colleges and universities do mapping. We can take advantage of that. But we need to do this work, whether it's with the African American progressive community, the Hispanic, Puerto Rican. You can go down the whole laundry list of folks who are progressive, who are liberal, who are radical, and ask us the questions, what can we do to serve you? What matters to you? So that if we put on a programming, some programming that addresses LGBTQI issues, that we're not doing it from a one person thinks they know everything. We're doing it from we've done the research, we've met with them. They've told us what they need to know and who we can bring on. We have a Rolodex of people who can be on the show. That's how you develop the program. Beyond that, again, ascertaining their needs, wants, and aspirations, and then design the public service impact strategy. It may not be on air. You may find a whole wing of your target audience that doesn't even listen to the radio. Okay, that's where you get to these millennials. Most of them don't. My daughter doesn't listen to the radio.
Thank you.
She's 17. I don't even think the millennials are part of the equation for the radio. But if you create podcasts, if you create streaming content, you might reach them. If you create viral, short form stuff, it might be video, not radio. We have to ask what we can do to serve. It's user-driven, not producer-driven, not programmer-driven. It's user-driven. It's a different model than we're accustomed to. I didn't grow up with that. I'm 52. I'm an old man with respect to the way the place where things are going. I'm saying I grew up when cable was first coming on the scene. We're way past that now. Okay? Content. What's that? I wish I did. I don't. So in the center is community media. There is a place for individuals like you, people who are concerned citizens, who think they have something to say, who know they have something to say, know they can contribute. But not everybody is made for media. Not everybody is built to be on air. Some people sound terrible on air. Maybe you should be a producer. Maybe you can help put the show on. Maybe you ain't got the voice. Maybe you don't have the ability to speak coherently on the air. But you know how to research like a mother. You know what I'm saying? So if you are that person, don't be so perplexed or convinced that being on the air is the answer. You can contribute. If it's really about public service, it's not about you. It's not about you. It never was. It's about public service and how you can contribute to that. How you can assist WBAI to be that for the community. On the right side is a wheel for social media strategy. I'm not going to go through that. I'll distribute this PowerPoint maybe and you can dissect those things. The ideate process is really about you come up with an idea because you're trying to solve a problem. How do we deliver maximum public service to progressives in New York City? You design a test, what they call a low-res prototype. You engineer it, you send it out, you test it a little bit, you keep working with it until you find something that's crystallizing, you keep testing it, and eventually you execute on the idea. But it's this repetitive testing of the idea. It's not just, I got a good idea, let me put a show on. No, it's got to be a process. Programming comes from people who have expertise, not because someone had a good idea. So, development. Diversifying our revenue centers is crucial to Pacifica's future. Okay? We're not going to be able to tap into major donors all the time, and we sure as hell can't do these pledge drives like y'all doing here. Right? Now, with that being said, you have to do them to be able to make rent, to make your fees to the national. So Bertold has his hands behind his back.
No.
In some respects. Now, there are other reasons, I know. There are other reasons why we're there. But he wouldn't be doing it if he didn't feel like he had to. So again, this gets back to what I said earlier. If you have best practices with respect to revenue generation, if you go to greater public and learn how to do pledge drives more efficiently and effectively, if you learn how to do major donor appeals more efficiently and effectively, if you learn how to generate revenue in a more effective and professional manner, we can reduce the pledge drives. I bet you if there was a calculus done on the number of hours Pacifica pledges with respect to its return on that investment, it would be way down here compared to public broadcasting, who has mastered the art of pledge drive. They researched it. It's research-driven. It's scripted. It's understood there's a way to do this that is proven to generate revenue. We are still operating from, this is how we've been doing it for 50 years. That doesn't work anymore. We got to move to a different space.
We hate it too.
I'm sure you do. Where's everybody at? These are the things I believe. I wanted to put this up here. I should have probably made it the first slide. We are a member of the public media ecosystem. I said this earlier. If you don't believe that, don't ask for CPB money. Take it off the table and move away from it. As long as we want that $1 million check from CPB, we're public media. And the reason I say that is because we're listed as public media by CPB. Anytime we get federal funds, we are part of public media as far as Congress is concerned. So get that notion that we're something different out. There's a lot of variance in public media, just as there's a lot of variance in the Hispanic community. Okay? Just like there's a lot of variance in the black community. It's part of a diaspora. Okay? We are part of public media. The key, claim it and take advantage of the tools that are there. I showed you all those affinity organizations. We should be members of all of them so that we can employ best practices to do what we want to do as best as we can and still be progressive, liberal, communist, all those adjectives. We can still be all those things. But we should be employing best practices to get there. Public service is the goal, and we're wasting a lot of energy being inefficient. Pacifica struggles because it is faith-based, belief-based, as opposed to knowledge and expertise-based. I spoke of that earlier. I do, though, strongly believe that there's a high ceiling for this organization. I wouldn't have come here if I didn't think that. People keep thinking I'm only going to be here for a year, and the board may decide that's all I need to be here for, right? But if it's up to me, I'll retire in this position. I'll be here for 20 years, and we'll all get to love each other and feel good about the work we're doing because we will have revitalized this organization, and all of a sudden, we'll be this multi-million-dollar enterprise that provides outstanding public service to the communities we desire to serve. We don't have to be anything less than authentic and still employ the best practices that will help us get there efficiently and effectively. I just don't want you to wear yourself out. That's really what this comes down to. We're spinning our wheels doing a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And one of those things is patch quilt programming. We'll talk about that in a second. There's data that shows it's ineffective. We'll get to that. So, let's talk about what you guys are doing specifically here. Here's your audience. Now listen, let me put this out there first. I don't believe that you measure a show's effectiveness strictly on its revenue potential. Thank you. I also don't believe you measure a show's effectiveness based on its audience numbers exclusively, because I recognize that the way radio works, and this is why patch quilt programming doesn't work. Radio is not, I repeat, radio is not an appointment listening. People don't say, oh, it's 7 o'clock on Thursday, let me turn on my show, unless they're your close friend. Okay? Most people, 95% of listeners, don't listen like that. There's plenty of data and research that suggests that, and anyone who's been in programming knows that. It's why public broadcasting doesn't do it that way.
What is this data? What is this from?
This is Arbitron, and I know you have your issues with Arbitron, Nielsen. That's why I said I'm not a complete buyer of it myself. I understand the issues with it. All I wanted to show you here is that the shows that do strip across Monday through Friday are the only ones that have the high ARPs there. Okay? I'm not going to get into the details. But again, I want to be clear. I'm not, in fact, I'm going to skip through these because, again, I'm not stuck on this notion that your audience numbers tell the whole story. Because what I also know is that if you don't put programming in the right place, it's going to fail anyway. Okay? You put a hard-driving news program at 11 o'clock in the morning, probably not going to get a great audience. Put it during drive time, you'll kick ass, right? Put a show that's real lifestyles oriented during the week. Weekend, yeah. People are a little bit more casual, laid back, they want to hear that kind of stuff. The reason why NPR is so enormously successful is because, no, you can cough and all that if you want. You cannot refute the fact that 2 out of the 3 most listened to national programs in the country, commercial, non-commercial, are produced by NPR. There's a reason for that. It's not because they sold out. It's because they recognize best practices and research and data-driven approaches deliver.
But they did sell out.
No, they didn't sell out. They are what they want to be. They only sold out to you.
Correct.
They are what they want to be. They want to be a place for those who are curious. It's a different mantra than what Pacifica is about. Pacifica has said it's not just curiosity. We want to be progressive. We want to move. We want to be a movement creator. That's a different charge. They're both valid. We're part of the same family. There's no reason to be have animus towards NPR. They are what they are. I'm not saying we have to be like them. I'm saying let's take advantage of the same things they're taking advantage of to understand user behavior and create our own model based on the audiences we want to serve. We don't have to use their research. Their research methodology, though, is sound. I may not want to serve the curious. I want to serve those who are civically, politically, and culturally active. That's a different group.
Arbitrons have been so.
I'm not, get off the arbitron.
Nielsen.
That's not the issue here. I should have skipped these. I should have skipped those. That's not the issue here.
You said Q&A was gonna be at
We're going to do Q&A in a second. But let me be real clear, folks. I'm not stuck on stupid with Arbitron and Nielsen either. All I'm saying is if CPB, if NPR is what they want to be. The question is, are we what we want to be? They have defined who they are and what they want to do in their service. And they're highly successful because they employ best practices. We have to do the same for our group. We don't have to say we're going to satisfy the same niche. We're not trying to steal their audience. Our question is, how do we get to progressives, liberals, all the people we marked down earlier with best practices? Get off the arbitron thing. That's not important here. I don't believe that's the measure. I don't believe how much you raise. When I hear these stories, I raised the most money at the state. That doesn't mean a damn thing to me. That may mean that you personally are good at raising money, but your show may be completely ridiculous and disruptive to the flow of the schedule. So
That's why we have Leonard Lopez. I knew there was a reason.
Would you please wait till the end?
So here we go.
Yeah, you got 200 people.
Goodness.
Okay, guys. Let's maintain civility. Let's maintain civility. A couple things on this slide that are truisms, I believe, of program schedules. Again, you got to be user-driven. Strict programming does work. There's a lot of data, there's a lot of research that supports strict programming during the weekdays between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. It could be someone like you, though. It doesn't have to be Leonard Lopate. It could be you. The question is, are you available 5 days a week for an hour? If you're not, then we don't need to talk about it.
That's not the question.
No, it is the question, because the question is this. Let me get to this, okay? The real bottom line is this. The person who gets that 1 hour every day of the week slot can be anyone in this room. It can be anyone in this room if your public service is good for that. You're talking about something I have nothing to do with.
But you're saying,
Stop for a second. Stop for a second.
are you available? People are getting.
I know that. Hold on, guys. Hold on, guys. Calm down. I got this. I got this. Shh. I got this. Slow down, folks. We're good. Let's just maintain civility. We're going to have Q&A, but you got to listen first. I'm espousing my philosophies. I didn't say they're all right. I'm telling you what I believe. And I'm telling you what I know through research and program development I've gone through. I've produced national programs. I've produced local programs. They're on the air now. I have a trail because of the research and programming expertise I've been availed to. Okay? So I'm just sharing what I know through study. Okay? So strict programming, again, it works. It's been proven. PRPD does research all the time to verify the effective scheduling approaches. It really helps with promotion. Predictability and reliability is the most important aspect of a program schedule. The reason why patch quilt programming doesn't work is because if I tune in every day at 5 o'clock, chances are I kind of want the same kind of stuff. I don't want it to be reggae one day, a news show about gays and lesbians the next day, a show about the Hispanic culture on the next day. That you may lose me. And what happens, and this is the worst part of patch quilt programming, you're reinventing your audience every hour. That's the problem with it. You're reinventing who you are every single hour. Not everybody, thank you, not everyone is as curious as you to listen to every show on Pacifica, on WBAI. Most audiences are only there for an hour, 2 hours at a time. They need reliable, predictable scheduling. Should be a blend of local and national. We can be hardcore about New York and the metro, but it's also valuable for our people to understand the world around the metro, right? We're already working on, I'm going to show you, we're working on how we can develop national programming within the Pacifica network. How BAI can be a contributor to it, and be a programmer of this national program. We're working on that right now. I'm going to show you the clock for it. Greater flow is another element of why the strip programming works. You have to create flow. So if you want to create programming that speaks to the African diaspora, put those shows in the same area so that the people who like that stuff can stay with you for 3 and 4 hours at a time. If you have one here on Thursday at 6, another at overnight at 2 in the morning on Monday, and another, that doesn't work. That stuff doesn't work, and it works on any formula that you want to talk about in terms of content. Who's ever heard of OES? No one?
No idea.
It's called optimal effective scheduling. Who's ever heard of imaging? Okay. Imaging is creating short promos that do nothing more than identify who you are. Talks about who you are in a creative, often dramatic or dynamic way. It's not a promo for the next show. It's not an underwriting spot. It's just something that says this is what we are. This is what WBAI is. This is what Pacifica is. They're called imaging spots. OES, for optimal effective scheduling, is a formula based on your cume, based on your audience, to determine that you have to play a single spot a certain number of times for it to be heard. To be heard. Not even acted on, just to be heard. So you think you're doing something great because you've got your one show for 1 hour on Thursday, but if no one knows it's there because there's no promos for it, then no one's going to listen to it, and you're not going to get the fundraising support that you need. Uh-oh, the battery's gone. No? Okay. All right, so I mentioned some clocks. This is a morning show clock. Now, I know there's some issues with the morning show here. That's not what I'm talking about. So hold your fire. I'm not talking about that. Just to recognize that with Democracy Now! At 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we need something local to lead into it. And this is the kind of clock that you can put together. Not everything's on here. Some things aren't showing up on this video. But anyway, you see on the left, you segment your hour so that you can insert the business, promos, not underwriting, but just promos. Things that allow you to promote what's happening next hour, what's happening next day, the imaging stuff we talked about. I'm going to go through these quick. Pacifica Coast to Coast is that evening drive news program we're talking about. Pacifica doing a news program. That's the clock. What that means is that big yellow one, that would be WBAI's single news. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. That would be WBAI. This is how BAI would look, right? The yellow stripe, the yellow one, in, right here. That would be like a 20-minute feature, 15-minute. It could be a talk, a conversation. It could be a package, but it's something that BAI produces. The other 4 blue ones are the other stations in the system. Taking that 20-minute piece, condensing it into 5 at their station, and contributing to the network so we can carry and show the radius of social, political, cultural information that's happening across the network on a daily basis. Imagine if our listeners could hear what's going on in Berkeley, Los Angeles, Houston, the affiliates, DC, on a daily basis from a Pacifica perspective. That's what we're talking about. Progressive. That's all I can say right now, because it may be defined differently. This is for you. When I talked about your programs having clocks, this is a simple version of it. How many of you, when you first get on the mic, you open up the air for calls? Raise your hand if you, first thing you do.
What will say again?
The first thing you do when you start your shows, you open up with calls.
But I must say, it's only been about a month that we've had the 7 lines, but we do now have 7 lines. So more people will be opening up with calls.
Okay, but when you do your show, you open it up, and the first thing you do is open it up for calls?
No.
You don't have to call
No, you
them.
do it later.
How long? How much later?
I don't know, 15 minutes.
15?
It depends.
Okay. The key to a successful public affairs show, and this has been proven with data, there are exceptions,
27 minutes.
is establishing your guests' credibility, their expertise, and the subject. That's how you set it up. You do call in at the second half of the hour. And the reason you do that is how many of you have regular callers for your show? And they may be someone who ain't got a damn thing to say, but, hey, George, good to hear you again. I just want to call in and tell you what I think, right?
Yeah.
That's synonymous with public affairs programming across the country. It's because those people are looking for an opportunity to express themselves and they think they got a friend in you. And it may be true, but that doesn't serve your audience. Just like only 10% of the people listening actually support you financially, less than 1% call. Okay? Less than 1% of the people listening to you are ever going to call you. When you do these shows, most of the time they say, I'm a first-time caller. How many times have you heard that? So, you don't open this part up until people have had an opportunity to digest the subject. Understand the person you're interviewing so that when they call, they're talking about this. Not them. This. I believe in call-ins, but you do it in a way where the call-ins are informed.
Okay, we don't have screeners.
Well, that's a whole other matter. So here's the contract that I created when I was at WBAI in Baltimore. I met with my volunteer programmers every quarter, every 3 months. And I would use that meeting as an opportunity to update them on things happening with the station, to do some training, perhaps, to discuss opportunities for them to take advantage through the station, and for how we can maximize their work, right? The first thing on here is WBAI and the programmers equals community media. That's a given. You are community media. WBAI is a platform for public service media. In other words, public service. I knew this thing was funky. Programmers reflect the progressive community ecosystem of New York Metro. Progressive may not be the term. I know some of y'all are squinting with that one, but whatever you want to call it. Okay? Access to WBAI has to be seen as a privilege. And you have a responsibility with that privilege. You're one of a few people in this entire billion-folk city that has access to the airwaves for some reason. But you have it. It's a privilege and a responsibility. I told Linda I think she should meet with you quarterly, and that you should be required to be at 3 of those 4 meetings.
Yeah, I have that on our sheet.
And if you're not there, that may be cause for losing your show. Because you need to be deeply informed on what's going on with this organization. So when they do pledge drives, you're not just getting on talking about support me, support my show. There's an actual campaign that she's built out, or the development director's built out, that you guys are pushing instead of just your show. Support WBAI because we are, not because you are. Okay? It's all these things in white are things that can be discussed at the meetings. You can discuss community ascertainment strategy. Some of you might have access to communities that could be useful for us to drill down on. And WBAI has an issue that they've got to bring to the table. They've got to come to the table with resources as well. You should have adequate studios. I know there's some issues there. But they should create a professional work environment. You shouldn't feel threatened here. Radio and digital media resources should be made available. They should be finding ways for those of you, not everybody should be doing a podcast. Not everybody should be doing digital media. Some of your programs don't warrant it, quite frankly. Some of you do and should be doing it and aren't. Okay? But BAI should be helping you cross that bridge, ask those questions. Timely updates, information, and notices. If they're going to cut your show, you should be given ample notice, right?
Yes.
Part of the equation. But those happen if you're going to meetings quarterly. There are no surprises.
No.
Stop. I know that. But if you're meeting quarterly, there are no surprises because she can share audience data. She can share engagement. She can talk to you about fundraising results. And so there's no surprises when you get called up. Formal training is another thing that WBAI should be providing. So at the end of the day, these are all the things that the pact encompasses. It should be a two-way street. They benefit from you, you benefit from them. More importantly, the community benefits from you being in lockstep because your public service mandate is the real goal here. That's it. This is my contact information. I would strongly suggest you try me by email. Phone is difficult with me because I address a lot of conference calls throughout the week. And some of my LSB board members know that. In fact, I'm going to rush out of here to go on one at 8:30.
What?
Well, shortly after that. How about that? So listen, I can be a little late, but I promised I would open up for Q&A. This is why. At least 15 minutes. Yeah. So
More than 15.
I will do our best. That's why I said I needed to limit that opening presentation you guys did, so I would have.
But then we didn't start with 20 minutes after.
I know that was a technical issue. That's why I said we'll go another 15. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're in a lot of programmers here are in a bind with regard to this issue of give money for my show, because there's this kind of idea that each show has a quota.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
And then therefore it becomes, how do we stand there at this show,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that, for example, I work on the housing show.
Yeah.
The housing show traditionally has never made money and was always preempted during fundraising. It doesn't matter what we come up with. Very rarely have we raised a whole lot of money, but in New York City, you can't not have a housing.
Well, let me give you an answer to a couple of phases.
But the quota is the issue.
I know.
That drives
Let me
my
address
show
it.
instead of the radio station.
Let me address it. You just said WBAI has to have a housing show. I'm not sure that's true. What WBAI needs, what it needs from a public service standpoint, is housing issues to be addressed.
Exactly.
That's different than having a show.
In depth.
In depth.
Yeah,
But that's
in depth.
different than having a show. That's why I said very early on, not everybody's meant to have a show. Having a show is not the answer. The strict programming, if it's done properly, I'll use Leonard as an example. Leonard covers a myriad of social, cultural topics throughout the week. Anybody can do that.
Hello.
Anybody. He's not exceptional in that sense.
Well, he's exceptional for something else.
But that's fine. And listen, let's be civil. Let's be civil.
No, that's not. I didn't say. See, that's your.
No, I'm just asking for us to be civil. My point is, and I pointed out him because he's got a weekly strict show. What he's able to do is entertain a lot of different subjects throughout the course of a week, the year, and make sure that those issues are addressed for the benefit of the community. The key is that any one of you can serve in that capacity. Okay? So did I address you to some degree? It's not necessarily having a show.
Okay, but
It's making sure that that subject is
I
addressed.
understand that, but my primary point
Yeah.
had to do with the.
Oh, yeah. So let me address that
That
real
was my
quick. Let
primary
me address
point,
that.
which is driving the thing you say you don't want us to do.
The flaw.
We're being told to do
I know
it.
the flaw is that, and I said that I've only been in this job 2.5 months. If I had built Pacifica, that wouldn't be part of the matrix, right? I just said that earlier. I don't believe that ratings or revenue generated by your show is the measure of whether your show is effective. There are other measurements that need to be taken into account. So I say all that to say that I wouldn't have given you those as the benchmark. I wouldn't have said you have to raise a certain amount of money. That's in place because of where the station is financially. The pressures are created because we're not efficient and effective in how we raise money here.
Okay. A lot of what you presented tonight, many of us have shared with Pacifica management, WBAI management, and it has been ignored.
Okay.
And programming is driven by a director who wants a vision of what they believe should be done. There's no negotiation. There's no chance for any of us to meet. Are you asking or telling us tonight that is going to change? Because many of us have been pushed away because of program directors who just arbitrarily decide they just want to get rid of us for money.
Yeah.
So I'm asking because I had a functioning show. I actually did everything you said, social media, outreach, everything, brought live guests, and still got pushed out
Okay, let
and
me answer your
asked
question.
to negotiate and couldn't be done, and a new program director decided she didn't want me.
Okay.
Where can I leverage
I hear you.
so I can do some programming? I'm not even willing to do a full week anymore, you know, hourly, because of the disrespect. I would like to do some segments where it's about art fairs, because I have tapped in to the art scene, and they beg me still, beating down my door.
Okay, so
Tell me.
let me start with the notion of art programming first, okay? You'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere in nonprofit media an art radio program that does well, audience-wise, and there's a reason for that. We all value art. We all say we value art and culture. We all say we value museums and artists and what they do. Very few people listen to it on the radio.
I'm getting people to listen.
You're getting some. Unless you got what, you want me to pull up the
No, it's
Arbitron
based
data?
on marketing, advertising, and promotion.
Again,
Thank you.
all I can tell you is that, as I said with the housing, some things aren't meant to be shown. So let me give you an example of what I did with art and culture programming in Cleveland, which increased its audience by 5 times, okay? We used to have, at 2 o'clock, Monday through Friday, an arts culture magazine, a program that was all about arts and culture, hosted by a wonderful black woman who was well known in the community. It was the lowest rated programming on the entire schedule. Why? Because people don't tune in to art and culture. What they want, though, is access to it in the context of other programs. So when you have a news program, like the one I proposed that happens before Democracy Now!, and you include segments that are about art and culture, that works.
He suggested that.
That's fine. I'm not saying you didn't. What I'm saying is, you're right to approach it from the standpoint of, can I produce segments?
And I would be willing to do that.
And so let's explore that. No, let's explore that, because that's a more effective way to reach the
I'm
community.
not saying that that isn't.
Mhm.
I'm talking about how management treats us.
That's a whole other conversation that we'll get to at another time, maybe when we do our
That's not
one-on-one.
happening tonight.
Stop. We don't have time tonight, that's why, and it deserves more than 15 minutes. So we'll have that conversation. I was invited to come here and talk about programming philosophy. There was I'm sorry, I skipped over, there was a young lady here, I thought, no. Was it you? No. We'll go over here.
Yes, I disagree with you on so many things
You can.
you're saying. One, you contradict yourself by saying the script programming is effective. There, on the other hand, appointment listening is not. Housing notebook.
Let me explain it. Let me explain it.
Let her finish talking.
People do want to listen to Housing Notebook at 7 o'clock on Monday night because they hear in detail over a period of time very important things that tenants should know. And tenants do listen, and you can't do that if you just stick it in at some other program sometime and you don't hear it. That's the latest way of
Okay.
looking at well, wait, I'm not done.
You gotta let me address your
Yeah, but
statements.
Well,
Because-
I just want to also say that our producers are not motivated by belief. Our producers are some of the most educated, well-informed, intellectually deep people on their subject.
Nobody challenged that.
Find anywhere.
Nobody challenged that.
And you did say,
Is it data driven? Is it data driven?
Yes, it is. If you listen at all, you'll hear it.
It's data driven.
Yes, it
No.
is.
I'm saying that your ability to say that you reach audience is data driven.
I'm
No, it's
talking
not.
about content. I'm looking, you said we should be public radio and community radio is a bunch of amateurs.
No, I didn't say that. I never said that. I never said it was a bunch of amateurs. I never said that.
Well, you didn't say it was a bunch of amateurs.
I never said it was amateurs in the first place.
Like beliefs and not knowledge.
So let me address what you're talking about, okay? You're fundamentally and structurally wrong in your argument that people tune in at Monday, you said 7, the show's at 8, to listen to a show on housing. Most people who are concerned with that issue, even remotely, aren't tuning in Monday nights at 8 o'clock for that show. There may be a small clique who do, but because I'm telling you how radio works. The reason I say it's not appointment, it's lifestyle driven. Radio is a lifestyle medium. People wake up at a certain time, they turn on their radio instinctively, they listen to the radio at that time. They get in their car for lunch to drive across, they listen to the same. We're not talking about podcasts, we're not talking about time-shifted media. I'm just talking about the radio station. And what I'm just saying, people do it by routine. We have to tap into the user-driven routine. And what I'm saying to you is that people generally, if you survey individual listeners, they tend to listen to the radio at the same time every day of the week. And if you want to reach more than just a few people who tune in at 8 o'clock on Monday, you need to put that content in a vessel that is aired throughout the week and give it more of an audience so that it can be consumed and addressed by a larger population. I understand your passion for the subject. I'm telling you, it's not a user-driven approach. It's a producer-driven approach because the producer happens to be available to do the show at 8 o'clock on Mondays.
So you mentioned a lot of points. You mentioned some very good points. But my thing is how, and it was raised here, how producers are addressed.
Yeah.
And are not addressed.
Yeah.
And how we are not given notice.
Yeah.
And how we are still expected to raise funds and what have you. What is being done to correct that?
Part of it, no, it's a great question. Part of it is, I'm working with Linda and Bertold, and I'm working with the program directors and the general managers across the system to teach them best practices as I know them. Let me
No, I hear you, but I just have a quick follow-up when you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
So what did you actually say, did you actually commission Linda or PDs to just change programming?
No. What I did was I said, this is how you can create your program schedule to optimize audience development based on what is understood in data and theory and has been proven in the system, okay? So what I know for a fact is that during the weekdays, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., strip programming outperforms patch quill. It's just known, it's a research piece that is unquestioned. And anyone who argues against that is not giving it to you by data, they're telling you anecdotally what they think. But when I'm telling you, the data supports that. And when you find stations that don't perform well with strip programming, it's because they don't promote well, it's because they got bad people on the air, it's for a number of reasons. But all things equal, strip programming outperforms patch quill, especially during the day. Now, when you go to the evenings after 6, you can go vertical. You can say, we're gonna put shows that are all about health on Mondays. And people know, oh, Monday is health on, and they will hopefully tune in sometime in that window where you got health programs. Let me get back to your original question though, about how are we addressing this issue of how programmers and management deal with the programmers. I've only been in the job 2.5 months, but starting in January, all these areas of operations, I'm going to be meeting with the managers, the program directors, the development people at each of the stations on a weekly basis to start educating them up, informing them, providing information so that they can do their jobs better. That doesn't mean that it's going to solve your immediate issues. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be hunky-dory immediately. It just means that we're going to work towards improvement. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to be bringing in other experts. Sometimes I'm going to be bringing members of the Pacifica Network who do it well to speak to the other station managers or programmers or development people on what they did and why it works. The bottom line is we've got to train our leaders, our managers up. We have to create a higher level of professionalism, and that is everything from how they do the craft of art, of radio, to how they deal with the soft skills of dealing with the people who program. All of that's included.
You said you have a problem on your Houston radio station. What are those problems?
Factionalism is number one. They're bored whenever they meet, it's a clash. I know your board has some similar issues.
Our board doesn't meet.
I know, that's why I was being funny. When this board meets, it's literally a war. I sat in on their LSB meeting. The things that were approved, the next week were disapproved because they said it was a violation of the bylaws. Because someone was able to interpret the bylaws differently, and more importantly, took it to the national And because they're part of a larger majority faction, we're able to turn that decision at the local level around. That's factionalism being dysfunctional and leading to an undemocratic process. The local stations are governed by the national at the board levels, and that's how that happens. So the dysfunction is because, again, I wish we do blind voting. I wish the people in the room didn't know how everyone in the room voted, because I would love for our board members to vote from an informed space, from their true conscience and heart, based on what they really believe should be just, right? That's not happening right now. We've got people voting because they're down with the team, and whatever that team is, and that's a real problem. And there are folks in this room who are part of the LSB who don't like what I'm saying, and I know that. I say this to the national board, I say it to the local, I say it to the chair of the board. This factionalism is completely disrupting our ability to perform at a high level.
So, you know, what I want to say to you, first thing when you prep, there's a book called by David Huff called How to Lie with Statistics.
Okay.
How
to lie with statistics.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Number two, and we of all people, and we of all people should know how statistics can be used against us for so focus on. So I want to know, we got to use so many different things, you know, traditional, non-traditional, that way, this way, all that stuff together so that we can present from a New York perspective everything that's happening around the world. So what does Pacifica do to institute processes, say like for programming? And here's a good example. All the people whose programs were slated to be cut got notified after the people who accepted programs that they wanted to do. So let's be clear, I understand programming is not static. We have to change. But we also have to get staff that is not interim, so that if for some reason the interim status of a program director or operations manager, one program director who's been here 2 months or 3 months, interim, and an operations director that's been here for years, interim, you know, we don't get this, you know, we don't have a standard policy. And people in here, or in Pacifica Network, or all of us, have to also understand, though it is about us, it's about us and who we're, what we're trying to do in terms of the station, but at the same time, there are also people in here, and when somebody comes and says, do you want to do a show? Yes, they accept. So we got to create a policy, environment policy, where there are processes that if I think that you should go into next month, that I would have done a 3-month analysis, that you, and I would have said, oh, if you didn't correct it, and we'll try to do this.
Let me answer.
Also, and one last thing, there got to be producers that are also constantly working together and doing the same, you know, supporting each other as opposed to saying, it's my show and it's our station.
Because you guys don't meet.
No, well,
how's that going to happen, right?
That's one meeting.
That's why you got to meet quarterly, so that you can collaborate, so you can work with each other to make things better. You ask, what's being done?
Yeah, the institute policy statewide. I mean, you know, network-wide.
Yeah. All I can tell you is I gave you my philosophy on how no, listen to me. I'm answering your question.
Okay.
I gave you my philosophy on how programming is developed. I don't believe because someone has an idea that's enough.
No, but I'm talking about environment as a worker. I'm all workers.
That's not the point. Listen to me. That's not the point.
Okay.
No, it's not. Let me answer the question.
Okay. We just disagree.
No, that's fine. But let me answer the question based on my belief and philosophy.
Okay, but based on my belief, so which one's going to work?
Well, I'm the executive director, and I'm not playing power playing
but
here.
You may not be there.
No, I could not be. But more importantly, I'm sharing with you something that is data-driven, research-based, and tested.
And I can give you data-driven stuff.
Let me answer the question.
Okay.
Okay. And out of respect,
I'm not trying to be rude.
I know you're not, and I'm not trying to.
Okay.
No, we're at peace with this. I'm trying to answer the question.
Go ahead.
If it was up to me, I would shut down the station for a week or a month. Completely shut it down and only have cranes and the sounds of machinery on the air for a year. I mean, for a month. Let me tell you why.
First you said a week.
A month. Because you need about a month to do what I'm about to say. Okay? Because the audience needs to know that you're working on re-establishing this station, okay? But what I would do is tell you to do the community engagement work.
Do what?
The community engagement work I articulated. That's how programs, that's the I'm giving you the answer.
Successful.
The answer is to start with community engagement. We have not surveyed the progressive community in New York enough to know what should be on the air.
That's not true.
Some people have done it, I didn't say singular, the communities, I meant communities. But you've got to ask yourself, we've got to do the surveying, we've got to ascertain to find out what kind of programming during the week makes sense on this schedule.
And then you got to accept that if I come up with, this is what happens. And then there has to be a process.
Yeah, I'm trying to give it to you. It's not just because you came up with an idea.
No, but we need to institute one here. If that we had processes, a lot of this crap would not be going on.
I don't disagree, but it's sort of like, sometimes I have this argument with the board, right? They believe that the financials are so bad that they need to do intervention. And I'm saying no, there's context to this. You have to understand that this is a process to resuscitate the company financially. So be patient and allow us to work it out. The same thing applies here. This is not an overnight job. So I'm not addressing this issue of whose show got cut and all that. What I'm saying is if I was programming BAI, I would start almost from scratch, asking the questions, what kind of content needs to be happening to strip across the weekdays? No, I'm giving you the answer. If you don't want to hear it,
when you say stripping, you mean constant, the same time for how long?
Yeah, I'm saying you could do 6 shows during the week that are 1 hour across the schedule that address
the same issue.
No, not the same issue. They all have different perspectives. They all bring different things to the table, but they're reliable and predictable across the week. Leonard is predictable. For those who like his show, they know they got him Monday through Friday at that time. You need the same thing across all your hours during the day.
That's number one.
And that's the first step.
Okay.
That's the second.
Oh, second. Okay.
Community engagement was first. The third is asking, how can we promote this stuff? How can we get it out there? There's a lot more to it, but
I agree with you. So the point is that even if we have to have stripping, who decides who's going to be the stripper?
There are other people who have questions.
I'm coming around.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I just said, if it's strip programs, if it's got to be a strip, who decides who's going to be the stripper?
Well, no. Okay, yeah. Let me answer that question because that was brought up earlier. This is why I said it's important to have professionals, people who are trained in management positions. Take care. So the person who should be making those decisions is an informed, educated, and trained program director who can get counsel, can establish a community advisory board, who can have a producer committee who helps him understand what might be useful, but it's not going to be because you have told him this is what you should do. You're helping, or her, you're helping them determine how to best do the study of the community to determine how the show should be formed. It is a process. I outlined some of it on this. And like I said, we got a long way to go. There was someone I'm supposed to hit.
Jessica.
Hi, I'm doing news segments. I'm
Okay.
a new audio person, and I thank you. I mean, that's cutting edge with all the journalism schools right now. I mean, that's what all of us are hearing, and it's the result of social media and the internet. This is a completely new paradigm. And I also want to say, like the lop shots at letters, I personally find offensive. So if people could tone that down, I really find them offensive.
Okay.
That's too bad.
We'll give you the data.
Okay, thank you. Right here.
Yeah, so
I'll get you next.
basically what I hear is that all of us that have shows are kind of fired in the grand scheme of things, according to your plan.
What's happening right now?
And that one of the things that I feel very strongly about is the way the program changes have been done is not data-driven. And when you talk about data-driven, you say, well, I'm not talking about the Nielsen's, but then you constantly refer to them.
No,
I think that, if you want to have changes, we want some kind of program advisory board, because a lot of us are from various communities. We have some of that.
Yeah.
We do need focus groups.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. But, you know, to just like come in like a charging bull. Yeah. I'm not saying you're the charging bull, but you could be. But what I'm saying is that the changes that have happened in a way that is profoundly disrespectful, is not going to win people over, and that, you know, if you want to implement them in this sort of fashion, you're going to disaffect even more people. And I have to say, too, that BAI has not always been like a financial basket case. And we have long had actual programs, but there have been profound management problems, not solely locally, but significantly locally, but nationally as well. And I think that there needs to be a pause. January 7th should be X'd out, and we need to be having meetings with, you know, the programming staff here, with you, etc., in order to work this out so that you bring people along and don't just alienate them.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had...
Can I answer the question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is good. So one of the things I've tried to articulate when I address folks in community radio is that we have to get beyond the ego system and get to the ecosystem. And what I mean by that is that it really isn't about the programmers and their shows. It's about public service for the organization. So the question is, how do you support the public service mandate of WBAI? We had this breakdown with you. It may not be a show. It might be segments that contribute to a script program. I know you're shaking your head, but the bottom line is, I'm telling you the most effective way to have impact with your content may not be a show. And I think we got to get off this notion that every time we meet somebody who has a great idea, they get a show. It's got to move more towards when we meet people who have great ideas and are connected. The question is, how can we bring them into programming that will impact and have resonance with the audience based on how they use media? That's how this is done. We're talking about, that's why I said, we're talking about an old playbook when we're only talking about our individual programs. It's not about your program. It's about the ecosystem. It's about the public service of the organization, WBAI's public service. So the better question, in my opinion, is go around the room and survey what you can bring to programming in a plural sense. And maybe some of you do get reconstituted as programs, because we recognize there's enough resource that you can deliver to make that work. Some of you may be repurposed into being part of a larger show because your subject fits into the context of something that is probably better off being stripped across the week.
Maxie, so we have about 15 to 20 more minutes, more than we were supposed to have.
I'm way over my time.
Yeah, so I'm glad to give us 20 more minutes and we're late. So in about 15 more minutes, we're going to have to leave. Because, you know, just letting you know.
I know I didn't answer everything you brought up.
Well, you kind of dodged the question.
I didn't mind.
I think so, because I think that if you don't, like, take a stand about, like, how things are done,
that's different.
Then
let me address
you
that.
know, this is a profoundly bad management style.
I get that. And there's a lot of things happening around the system that I don't agree with. I also don't run any of the local stations. I'm at the larger national level, and all I'm really supposed to be doing is influencing what happens, managing the folks in Bertol's position to do what they do better, right? So I can talk to Bertol and Linda about communicating effectively, more effectively with you all when decisions like this come down. We certainly will have those conversations. But what I'm really getting at is the conversation may not be about how angry you are about losing your program. You're missing my point. It's not about the programs. It's about your contribution to the larger programming of the station. It may be determined by doing the analysis that you'd be better off being a part of something bigger than yourself than an isolated island of a program unto itself. So again, that's two different things. How that you were treated, the way you feel disrespected, that's a whole different conversation than what the end result might be as a result of those decisions. And I'm saying I can't address all of that. That's not my role. My role is to get the folks who are in management positions upgraded so that they perform their work better, and we get a system that works better. That's a slow grind, it's a process. I can't put every fire out at every local station. I understand the trauma that some of you feel, and I get it. Because I've had to make those decisions myself. In Baltimore, I went from 40 programmers to 22. But I increased audiences by significant percentage and revenue by 300%. My point to you is that it was better for the station and its public service by what I did. It wasn't good for some of those individual programmers, but the station, its public service increased by over 30%.
I just want to ask a general question. You've already spoken about how you feel about the various stations and how things go. I also heard you say something about the music that you did. So what is your overall view? I mean, this is mostly talk here.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right. So how does music fit into your overall view?
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody knows that music programming, the way we're set up now, will never generate a dime unless we go out into the community, which I've been saying for 10 years.
Yeah.
I just want to say this.
No, it's great.
I'm a member, along with her, of the largest jazz organization in Brooklyn. And we've never been to one of our 15-year festivals to do anything. No table. Now, I'm going to break in a name so you all know. When Bernard was here, we did that.
All right.
Okay, we did that. We did community outreach. So now I want to know, in this new environment, how do you see music fitting there?
That's a great question. So, it's more difficult to do a split format than it is to do a singular format. All talk, all music, right? So, you got to pick your poison if you're going to do music. So the station in DC, for instance, Jazz and Justice, WPFW, they've made a commitment to jazz, and they have full license to do it because when they surveyed the market, no one else brings jazz to the market. The problem you have here is WBGO is considered a standard bearer for jazz across the country. So it's hard to justify putting a lot of time and energy into a jazz program for this station when you have that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do it. I'm just saying it's a tough sell. It means that you probably aren't going to get prime time scheduling, but there certainly can be programming opportunities on the edges for something like that. It's hard to justify from a best practices of audience development, putting jazz in the middle of the schedule on this station because of the competition that you have. Because they're never going to be able to devote enough time and energy to compete or to offer you in a way that's unique and special, other than your unique presentation itself.
He's one of two shows, just so you know.
No, that's fine. My point is it's a tough sell, and I hear you. But it's a real tough sell because of the market. One of the things I mentioned, you have to do an analysis of the market. You have to understand how you fit in the context. I don't think you have any competition with being the radical station that you want to be. Maybe there are some others.
Can I add something there?
Please.
You do it by offering something that BGO does not offer.
So what would that be?
Well,
like real jazz?
Like, for example,
like real jazz instead of bubble gum?
Different
That's not true. I know that station. You're right. I know that station very well. That's not true.
So do I. What happens is
that's not true.
What we were offering
to
be differentiated from them.
I feel you. That was
to be differentiating from BGO. BGO does not do any Caribbean international jazz at all. They have zero.
Okay.
So this is what we offer.
Okay. So that's good. There you go. So here's how you do it. As you have Caribbean cultural program that's news and information,
right.
Tether the jazz to it.
Agreed. We do the same thing with blues.
Okay, good. Well, that's different because I don't know the social, political, cultural information programming that ties itself to the blues unless the blues isn't offered in the region.
It isn't.
Okay, so then you've got a justification for the blues. Jazz is a harder sell, I said, but if you're doing it in a unique way, where it's a Caribbean jazz experience or a Latin jazz experience, and you've got programming targeting the Latin or Caribbean community, tether it to those shows as a vertical block on the weekend, and you will win. Do it at 2 and 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, that's a problem. That's not good scheduling.
I just want to know your feeling.
Does that make sense to you?
I hear what you're saying.
Okay, good.
It could work.
All right. I'm sorry. I got time, I think, for maybe 2. I'll get you.
I'm not on the air.
I'm trying to make it quick.
By the way, I'm not on the air. I was one of the stations shows twice removed.
Thank you.
I want to just come back to a question about programming. There are some other elements involved in programming, like time spent listening, and tunes, and people who come in on every quarter hour. And one of the things that radio stations do is to recycle audience by way of keeping audience.
That's right.
The morning show was followed by a show, was followed by a show, followed by a show.
That's right.
That builds audience, and then you repeat that all day, and that's where the strip happens. It doesn't happen from first you make a strip without paying attention to what happens under the strip. So if you wait,
Now,
so that if you have whoever it is on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and under that show you have different shows every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. When the strip show is finished, the audience is going to leave if the show that follows it does not recycle that.
I agree.
So that just strip doesn't work unless it is vertical, and the vertical concept is repeated. It's also, you know, I've been in radio a long time. First time in public radio. Some of y'all know who I am. And some of you know who this is. Right? And so there's enough, when you talk about research driven, I mean, I know better than Arbitron. When Camilla Harris sued Arbitron, when Cuomo sued Arbitron, the language of their lawsuit was that Arbitron was willingly and knowingly giving out false information. The numbers that were shown on the screen, that didn't reflect how many New Yorkers listened to BAI. It reflected the number of people who were in the survey. And of the survey group, these are the people who are listening to BAI.
Right.
The ratings process has always been flawed, so that it has never accurately measured particular audiences. However, they said they weren't, Maxie said he wasn't paying attention to Nielsen.
It's not the only...
But it was on the screen. Never should have been on the screen.
That's why I passed through it quickly, because I agree.
But my concern is, though, if it is about recycling audience, how, and I think that most people here, and particularly me, and I know Bird, we come from research-driven radio. He's the one who taught me that radio was a science. And we've been in radio for years, from Buffalo to, I did the first nationally broadcast black call-in show in the country, and did it for about 20 years. We love radio and are into the science of broadcasting. I think that people agree with what you have said about what is wrong here and the kind of resources that need to be employed to correct it. I think that what they are saying, though, is that the decisions that have been made to correct it are the wrong decisions. That there's a lot of talk about what's wrong and how we should fix it, but what is being proposed is not consistent with what you said about research and research-driven. These decisions are not based on any of that. And last thing, but again, my concern with the programming is what I believe is a misunderstanding of how you build audience and how you recycle audience from show to show. When you show the clock, we know about the clock. And the clock in radio is established, and then they repeat that same clock all day unless you get into a certain part of the day which is called day parting. And you change the clock because of the time of day. And the last thing is that, I don't know if you all understand this, Bird can help me with this. Radio is personality driven. The idea that it is not is the reason that BAI is not the only station in New York that is performing below its potential. All radio is down. No radio station in New York City is performing at its potential. And one of the reasons is that radio absolutely has historically been personality driven. People do tune in to hear Felipe Luciano talk about the music because we are interested in his perspective on the music. Right. People tune in to hear Bird because we're interested in his Afrocentric perspective on art and culture. It is personality driven. And the research has said no to that. The research has said that it is not personality driven, and radio stations like WBLS, y'all ever heard of Frankie Crocker?
Yeah, do it.
Personality driven.
Yes.
And the research said no, and that's why BLS went out of business, by following research that is absolutely biased and incorrect.
So let me respond to you, because I agree with a lot of what you said.
You should agree with all. I didn't make any mistakes.
No. I agree with much of what you said, and I think it reinforces the strip that I articulated here. I didn't explain it in the detail that you did, but it would have been in the same notion. And the clocks, the value of having clocks as well. Radio is personality driven. That's why people listen to Leonard Lopez. How do you know that? Because I was at WNYC and he was there. And
they don't listen here to him. None of us listen.
You are the only audience, aren't you? I mean, the bottom line is what we know data-wise, and I know you don't want to justify the data, but the data suggests that Leonard gets audience.
We can get Kim Kardashian.
But you're missing the point, folks. Hold on, guys. Hold up. So when we talked about stripping during the midday, you can do 2-hour public affairs talk shows that are personality-driven, people who have unique perspectives. That's why I said there should be a mix of local and national. You can have someone on the West Coast who comes on at 2 o'clock to 4, someone on the East Coast who's on from 10 to 12, who give unique perspective. They bring national guests to the table, and they bring this name. There's certainly a place. I'm not against that. I believe that. I believe that concept.
But this station is still a local radio station.
Say it again.
This is still a local radio station.
Absolutely.
The local station can
the ruin of radio, I know this, and I'm going to agree with you.
What the local station can do is that, as Bird does the global experience,
yes.
You can open up your station.
One of the faults of radio was to corporatize itself.
Right.
And to go with this formulaic approach that eliminated a lot of the personality. I was part of the launch team for XM Satellite Radio. The idea there was that we were going to reinvent personality-driven radio.
Yeah.
Shortly after, they got bought by Sirius, and they went away from that, which is why I think that service sucks. So I agree.
Excuse me, if people are leaving, I have handouts for you.
I can take one more question. This lady's been having her hand up for the longest.
He has hand up the longest.
I know, but she has too.
Okay, sure. I want to talk about all this data you keep referring to, what it reflects. There's a lot of data that says that the attention span of Americans is shorter than it ever was. They've been conditioned by 50 years of television and Twitter and everything, and 3-minute sound bites you'll get on the news. Okay, so you know what you collected may be a result of this, and WBAI has always pushed the other way and tried to give room for the human mind to expand.
And that's
okay?
great. Let me answer that. Let me
finish. You don't get that on a segment. You get that in these in-depth shows where I have heard programs that changed my life, and so have many other people. You don't get this in this segmented kind of formula. I'm quite worried about that.
No, I'm not subscribing to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So no, let's be real clear.
Okay.
All the programming I've developed and the programming that is successful in public service media goes deeper than what happens on the commercial end. That's why, that's the whole point of NPR's approach, is to go deeper.
I listen to NPR all the time because our fund drives are so terrible, and let me tell you, it's like all hors d'oeuvres and very little substance.
I know, but that's why you have those shows that are a single host, delving deep with, like a Terry Gross, who can go much deeper. Different shows have different purpose. And some shows are able to go deeper. I'm saying those programs that are much more niche, that want to go deeper, require a different audience than the one that is passively kind of tuning into you when they're casually in their car or on the subway or whatever. It's a different.
Cater to that audience.
It's not about catering. It's recognizing how people are using the media. That's really what I'm trying to get us to understand. It's not about catering to a certain type. It's about understanding how people use it and building programming that speaks to that. I'm sorry, let me get this gentleman, I really have to let this go.
We are in the middle of crisis. You're talking long-term, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Under the old way that you're criticizing, this station is being ravaged. Any number of shows are being dismissed without any kind of consultation, or moved to, in some cases, impossible time slots, so it's said, this is it. If you don't take that, you get nothing. The deadline is January 7th. That's within the context of where we are right now. I'm not going to agree or disagree with anything you've said in the longer term. I'm talking right now.
Yeah.
It's put on the producers. You are the problem. They're not talking about any new ways to raise funds.
I don't think it's the producers, it's the
Wait a minute,
schedule.
let me talk. Let me
Wait
talk. You will talk later.
Wait a minute.
Okay? Let me just lay it out, all right? This is within the context of what I think is the reason, not that it shouldn't be changes. There's always got to be changes. The producers are being put on the spot, but there have been no changes in terms of really figuring out why we are doing all of this fundraising, which is approaching 50%.
I've explained why you're doing it.
I know,
Yeah.
but some way to change that, get additional revenue streams, do large events which would attract large audiences, and perhaps major organizations would buy tickets, get grants below. That is what I see as the major problem right now which needs to be addressed. What's going to happen right now is a lot of movement. They are not, I don't think, addressing the kinds of things that you were talking about. Just a lot of movement around. And after January 7th, a hard deadline, things will be shifted, and they have not listened to either the producers that are being decimated or the wider producer committee.
Yeah, okay, so let me...
They are not listening. They are not listening.
Okay. What I believe has happened here is management has looked at different data, whether it be revenue, whether it be audience, whether they look at the strip and say these programs don't fit well together, they don't flow well, and they've made programming changes based on it. Now, what I've done is work with Linda and Bertold to demonstrate what strip programming looks like, what better vertical strips might be. I've talked to them about how to format the individual programs in a more functional way. I know they're moving in that direction, and that's the contribution I've made to their process.
What about the competencies of management who've taken us to fiscal donation over a period now of going on 11 years?
Well,
where's that analysis?
There's a lot of factors to all this. You've got an LSB.
No, they were never entrusted with the bylaws of having any responsibility
well, that's,
of a practical nature. This is the buck stops literally.
You can't look at it that way because the bottom.
Well, then change the bylaws.
That's something we.
Because you don't have to argue with me about the functionality of the.
Okay. I gotta go. Listen, I appreciate your time and energy. I know I didn't say everything you wanted to hear. I know I said some things that may have disrupted a good feeling you may have walked in the room with. The bottom line is we're gonna Mimi and Mimi are gonna schedule another time.
Video conference.
And we'll continue the dialogue.
Yeah, and see, that's a problem. How you decide who you meet with.
No,
everybody.
I'm offering to meet with anybody.
That's what I'm just saying. But see, that's something.
It's a video conference for everybody.
What he just said, I'm just saying. You gotta look at that.
Now, we're going to do it before the changes, but that doesn't mean it's going to impact the changes. The bottom line is we're going to meet, we're going to discuss, and we'll talk about some things. No, they're not anybody's fault. I don't make the changes here. I don't make programming changes for WBAI. I'm at the national level. This is a self-contained unit. It's part of an ecosystem.
You know, I didn't get a chance, but on the national level, all this programming goes for naught if you don't have a good back office system. MEMSIS is a membership system, not a premium processing system.
I know about that.
Okay? And when I offered to build one free, no one wants it.
We'll talk about that.